We are all one. You've heard it. Seen it on bumper stickers, coffee mugs, social media posts. Maybe it made you feel something, or maybe it started to sound hollow after a while. But what if those 4 words aren't a slogan at all? What if they describe something that certain human beings have actually experienced, as directly and undeniably as they've ever experienced anything? And what if that experience, when it actually lands in a person, changes how they move through an ordinary day, including the difficult ones? That's what we're going to explore today. Welcome to Ascend and Awaken. We are all one is not a philosophy that people reason their way into. It is something they experienced. Thomas Merton, the Trappist monk who spent years learning to go inward, was not sitting in meditation when it happened to him. He was running errands for the monastery, standing on a street corner in Louisville, Kentucky, surrounded by strangers he had never met and would never meet again. And something opened in him. He said, "Then it was as if I suddenly saw the secret beauty of their hearts, the depths of their hearts where neither sin, nor desire, nor self-knowledge can reach, the core of their reality, the person that each one is in God's eyes." And then the line that stops most people when they first hear it. There is no way of telling people that they are all walking around shining like the sun. All of them. The ordinary strangers on the street, shining like the sun. This is not a belief Merton adopted. It is something he saw directly. On an ordinary afternoon, on an ordinary street corner, in an ordinary city. That is the difference between a slogan and a lived reality. Merton arrived at this through Christian contemplation. But he was not alone in what he found there. Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Buddhist monk, poet, and peace activist, who brought mindfulness practice to the Western world, spent his life pointing at the same truth, using a word he coined specifically because no existing word was precise enough. He called it interbeing. He said, "We do not exist independently. We inter-are. Everything relies on everything else in the cosmos in order to manifest, whether a star, a cloud, a flower, a tree, or you and me." And then he drew the practical implication as clearly as anyone ever has. He said, "If you suffer, I suffer. If you are not safe, I am not safe. There is no way for me to be truly happy if you are suffering." This is not idealism. This is what the mystics across traditions kept finding when they went deep enough, that the boundary between self and other, which feels so absolute from the outside, dissolves at the interior level into something that cannot be divided. In the Sufi tradition, Rumi pointed at the same truth with one of the most striking images in all mystical poetry, that we are not drops separate from the divine ocean. We are the ocean temporarily taking the form of a drop. Julian of Norwich, the 14th century English mystic whose entire revelations came down to a single answering truth, said it in the simplest possible language. He said, "All shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well." Not some, all. Ram Dass, the American spiritual teacher, whose journey took him from Harvard psychology to a lifetime of teaching about love, expressed the same recognition in the most humane and gentle way I know. He said, "We are all just walking each other home. Different centuries, different traditions, different vocabularies, the same pointing." Here is where the teaching gets honest. You cannot manufacture the experience of oneness. You cannot decide to feel it through an act of will. You cannot read enough books about it, think about it hard enough, or adopt it as a belief system and then live as if it were true. The mystics were unanimous on this point. The experience of oneness is the fruit of interior work, not the starting point of it. Meister Eckhart described it this way. God, he said, is nearer to me than I am to myself. Not distant, not separate, nearer than my own thoughts, nearer than my own heartbeat. But most of us cannot feel that. Not because it isn't true, because we are covered in fear and the noise of the ego's constant commentary, in the accumulated weight of how we were taught to see ourselves and each other as fundamentally separate. Eckhart Tolle calls this the pain body. the accumulated residue of unprocessed suffering that generates unconsciously more separation, more reactivity, more distance between us and the truth of what we are. The interior work, contemplation, prayer, meditation, the slow practice of presence is the process of clearing that covering. Not all at once, gradually, layer by layer. Wayne Dyer put it simply. He said, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. That's not a technique. That's a description of what happens when the interior shifts. Here's where I want to be completely honest with you, because this is the part that the spiritual books sometimes skip. The interior work doesn't exempt you from the world. It doesn't make the difficult person disappear. It doesn't dissolve the political division, the family estrangement, the colleague who presses every button you have, the stranger online whose worldview seems like everything you're not. You still have to move through all of that every day. So what does the "we are all one" teaching actually look like? Not in a monastery, not in a moment of mystical vision, but in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday with real friction and real people. It begins with a pause. Not a dramatic pause, just a breath. A half second of space between the stimulus and the response. In that space, however small it is, something can shift. Jesus didn't say love your neighbor as yourself because it was easy. He said it because it is the most transformative and the most difficult practice a human being can undertake. And the word as yourself is the key, because if you and your neighbor share the same ground, the same divine spark, the same essential nature, then loving them as yourself is not generosity. It is recognition. The question in the pause is not, do I agree with this person? Do I approve of their choices? Do I even like them? The question is, can I look past the personality, the behavior, the position they've taken, and touch, even briefly, what Merton saw on that street corner, the secret beauty at the core of their reality, the person they are in God's eyes? Ram Dass said it perfectly. If I go into the place in myself that is love, and you go into the place in yourself that is love, we are together in love. That's the entrance to oneness. Not if we agree, not if we are the same, if we both go into the place that is love. Let's be specific, because love your neighbor is easy when your neighbor is easy to love. The real test, and every genuine mystic knew this, is the person you find most difficult, the one whose behavior genuinely troubles you, the ones whose beliefs feel threatening, the one who, if you are honest, you would cross the street to avoid. Thich Nhat Hanh taught this practice he called looking deeply. Not looking at the person's behavior, but looking at the conditions that produce them, their history, their fear, their own coverings, their own unhealed places, their own accumulated pain. When you understand, he said, you cannot help but love. This is not naive. This is not asking you to pretend that harmful behavior is acceptable, or to abandon healthy boundaries, or to stay in situations that damage you. It is asking you to make one interior distinction between the person and the covering, between who they are in God's eyes and who they are appearing to be in this moment under the weight of everything they carry. That distinction, held even briefly, changes the quality of the encounter. Not always the outcome, but the energy you bring, whether you are adding to the world's separation or quietly and visibly declining to. You will encounter someone today, possibly someone difficult, and you will have a choice. Not a dramatic choice, a small one. Whether to meet them from the place of separation, or to take a breath first and try to touch, even for a second, the place Merton stood on that street corner in Louisville. The place where all the ordinary strangers are shining like the sun. You won't always be able to hold it. Some days the covering is too thick. Some days you will be the difficult person yourself and not even notice it until later. That is the human condition, and every mystic from Julian to Ram Dass has named it honestly. What changes, slowly, gradually, over years of interior work, is not that the difficulty disappears. What changes is how quickly you find your way back. As I sit with this teaching, I want to share something that is very personal and very current. I started Ascend and Awaken for one reason: to share what has genuinely helped me on my own spiritual path, with the hope that something here might help someone else on theirs. That is the only intention behind every video I make. So I'll be honest, when negative or unkind comments arrive, they genuinely catch me off guard. Not because I'm naive about the internet, not because the gap between the intention I bring to this work and what sometimes comes back still surprises me. This channel receives overwhelmingly positive and loving comments, and I am genuinely deeply grateful for that. There are also occasional comments that offer a friendly counter perspective, which I fully welcome. That kind of honest engagement is part of what makes this community feel real. And then there are the ones that are negative, sometimes genuinely unkind. In that first moment, there are reactions in me, thoughts about how they're wrong, impulses about how I should respond, a kind of defensive heat that rises before I even realize it's there. What I've learned to do, and I'm still learning, is to notice that reaction, to pause, to take a breath, and let it sit for a while rather than acting from that first impulse. Then comes the inner dialogue. Could I respond with love? Would anything I say actually land? Or would it simply give the energy more room to grow? I always come to the same place. No response. Just a quiet, private sending of love to that person, whoever they are, whatever they're carrying, and then letting it go. That pause, that breath, that choice about where to put my intention. That is the We Are All One teaching in the middle of an ordinary day. Not a monastery, not a mystical vision. A YouTube comment section on a Tuesday afternoon. Today's invitation is this. At some point today, just once, when you encounter someone who triggers any kind of reaction in you, try to pause before the reaction. Just a breath. And in that breath, ask one quiet question. What is this person carrying that I cannot see? You don't have to have an answer. You don't have to change how you respond. Just ask the question. That question, asked sincerely, is the beginning of the oneness the mystics were pointing at. Thank you for joining me here on Ascend and Awaken. So where in your life is it hardest to apply We Are All One? Please share in the comments. I read every one and I genuinely love to know. If Ascend and Awaken supports your spiritual journey, please consider subscribing for more reflections on spiritual awakening, timeless wisdom, and inner peace. Until next time, peace, love, and light to you on your spiritual journey.